Britain's newest war machine rolls like a thunderhead across a steel-grey horizon. Its silhouette is familiar: hull, tracks, a turret hewn from angles and intent. But everything inside is different. More lethal, more connected, meaner. And after 2 years of brutal public lessons from Ukraine, Britain's new tank has been rethought for a battlefield where drones buzz like angry hornets, where top-attack munitions swoop from the sun, and where the first side to see and shoot tends to win. The result is a beast with brains, a digitally rebuilt, actively protected, NATO-standard bruiser that can punch, think and survive in a way no British tank has before. It may look like a Challenger, but this is something else. This is Challenger 3, and it is legitimately insane. Let's set the stage. The last decade wasn't kind to British armour. Budgets tightened, upgrades slipped, and the old rifled gun Challenger 2 started to feel like vinyl in a Spotify world. Then 2021 hit with a shock. London greenlit a deep-cut modernisation, 148 tanks rebuilt, new turret, new gun, new electronics, handed to the UK-German joint venture Rheinmetall BAE Systems Land, RBSL, under an £800+ million contract. The plan? Deliver a digitally native main battle tank to the British Army, with the first vehicles entering service in 2027 and soldiering on to at least 2040. That wasn't just PowerPoint. On January 20th, 2026, the programme fired a big, loud proof of life. CR3's first crewed live-fire trials, showcasing the new gun and turret in anger. The firing milestone and job figures weren't rumours, they're on the record. But if you want the moment this tank truly snapped into focus, look east. In 2023, Britain sent a squadron of Challenger 2s to Ukraine, the first Western heavy tanks into the fight. The war promptly turned into a live lab for everything that kills and protects armour. One Challenger 2 was eventually lost, the first ever in combat. And suddenly, survivability in a drone-soaked top-attack world wasn't theoretical. It was Tuesday. The British donation, training pipeline, and the recorded loss are well documented. Uncomfortable, but instructive. So what did Britain build after watching all of that? Start with the heart transplant. Challenger 3 ditches the old rifled L30 and bolts in Rheinmetall's 120mm L55A1 smoothbore. The same lengthened, higher pressure lineage you see on the top Leopard variants. Higher chamber pressures and a NATO-standard breech unlock the good stuff. Latest gen Sabo penetrators like DM73 and programmable wall-bursting HE like DM11, with a joint UK-Germany enhanced kinetic energy EKE round. KE2020 Neo, expected as DM83, moving into qualification. In plain English, it shoots what your allies shoot, including rounds designed for hard armour 1 minute and bunkers, windows or drones launch sites the next. That's logistics sanity and battlefield flexibility in one long steel tube. If you're enjoying this video, hit that like and subscribe button right now. The turret wrapped around that gun isn't a mere refit. It's a new, longer bustled design with crew survivability at its core. 15 unitary rounds sit in the bustle, separated from humans by an armoured bulkhead and topped by blow-off panels. The rest ride in protected hull stowage. If the worst happens, overpressure vents away from people, not into them. That bustle architecture finally brings British ammo stowage into the same safety conversation as Abrams and late model Leopard, something crews have wanted for years. Now, about those eyes and nerves. CR3 is fully digitized on a generic vehicle architecture backbone, which sounds boring until you realize it means plug and play for sensors, radios, and mission systems that would give your old tank a migraine. The commander finally gets an independent, stabilized panoramic sight, Thales Orion, paired to a new DNGST-3 gunner sight, both feeding a modern fire control brain and a target tracking autopilot for hunting and killing. The driver too gets an uplift. Rheinmetall's Trailblazer vision system pipes into an embedded image periscope from G and H, allowing easy switching between digital feeds and direct optical view. In rolling terrain or in smoke, that's the difference between "I think I see a trench" and "I can drive it at 30 kilometers per hour right now." These aren't wishlist items, they're production contracts. Here's where it gets spicy. Ukraine proved that being lased is often the opening bell by a tank, a drone, a missile team with a rangefinder. So Challenger 3 integrates Elbit's Enhanced Laser Warning System, ELAWS, to tell the crew they've been painted, from where and right now. Cue instant smoke, evasive maneuvers, or a return shot. And because the threats today come in fast and shallow, Britain moved to hard-kill defences. In July 2023, the Ministry of Defence UK funded a trophy APS qualification programme for CR3, hardware, live intercepts, and UK/Israel test campaigns to wire the famous interceptors into the new turret. The end state? 60 trophy kits for frontline vehicles, with the rest fitted for but not with, so Britain can surge protection to whichever squadrons go first. That's a sober, budget-realistic answer to a modern problem. Missiles don't care about your plan. Protection isn't just about swatting rockets. The passive armour is new, modular, and intentionally hush-hush, publicly named Epsom outside over Farnham inside. The suite is a DSTL-designed, RBSL integrated package that replaces legacy Dorchester arrays with a thicker, more upgradable skin across the turret face, cheeks, and whole belly. Modular matters. It means battle damage swaps in the field, threat-specific packages, and a spine ready for the next "oh no" weapon to show up on Telegram. No marketing fluff, contracts are signed, integration trials have run. If you're picturing a hulking diva that can't get out of its own way, fair. The British didn't tear out the power pack. Automotive upgrades live under a separate heavy armour automotive improvement programme. Refurbished 1,200 horse CV12s, improved suspension, third-generation Horstman hydrogas, better cold starts, and reliability fixes. It's not a miracle diet. CR3 will still be heavier than CR2 in its thickest suit, and Britain knowingly accepted a power-to-weight delta versus Abrams or the latest Leopards. But the target is credible mobility, with fewer breakdowns and a digitally stabilized gun that can hit on the move. That trade, survivability and lethality over a 1,500 horse rebirth, was a conscious scope call. Everything so far could have been written before Ukraine. What changed after watching that war, up close and late at night on 1,000 phone screens? First, APS moved from interesting to non-optional. Trophy's qualification on CR3, the very fact that Britain spent money on it in 2023, is a direct response to top attack ATGMs and saturated rocket ambushes. Second, the British stopped pretending drones were someone else's problem. In 2025, London pledged a tenfold increase in drone deliveries to Ukraine, 100,000 systems, and announced a multi-billion-pound push to hardwire uncrewed systems across the force. That isn't charity, it's a mirror. The army that trains Ukraine is learning from Ukraine, and the tanks that will fight tomorrow will fight under a sky crawling with quadcopters. Third, counter-drone became a day job. The British Army Trials Unit literally bolted anti-drone cope cages onto Challenger 2s in 2025 to see what helps and what just rattles. The results were mixed, as anyone who's watched FPVs thread gaps like caffeinated hornets could predict. But the point is adaptation. Structural shields here, electronic jamming there, active protection where it counts. Those experiments, run on CR2, inform how CR3 gets kitted in the field. What you carry on day one versus what you add after the first contact report. Even training got a hard reset. British instructors found themselves adopting Ukrainian trenchcraft and low-tech counter-FPV tricks down to literal anti-drone nets because the battlefield demanded it. That tactical humility means crews rolling a CR3 will be more prepared to camouflage, deceive, and survive in drone-saturated sectors than their predecessors were. Add in the UK setting up dedicated drone hubs and new training courses, and you see the doctrine pulling level with the hardware. Now stitch the big picture. CR3 is fundamentally a turret revolution. Gun, sights, digital bus, laser warning, active protection. This is where the insane lives. The hunter-killer loop is finally fast. The commander scans on Orion, snaps a target. The tracker locks. The fire control crunches. The loader throws a NATO-standard round. The gun talks. And if anyone tries to put a rocket in your armpit, trophy barks. The bustle storage keeps the human part of the crew in the survivability game if HE cooks off. And the modular armour keeps the tank relevant as threats evolve. The digital chassis means upgrades can be software and cards, not years of wrenching. And because the army filmed it for all to see, the tank has already progressed through live development firings in Germany and then fully crewed live fire in January 2026. Let's talk ammunition reality, because that's where the old fleet hurt. CR2's two-piece ammo made sense in a rifled world. In 2024's Europe, it was a cul-de-sac. With L55A1, CR3 taps into a continental pipeline. Multi-purpose, programmable HE to pluck infantry from trenches or collapse a fighting position. Super Sabot long rod darts to punch modern armour. And a British-German effort to keep the penetrator race alive into the 2030s. Sound convenient? It's lethal and logistical sanity, especially for a country that fights in coalitions as a matter of habit. The next question is always numbers. 148 isn't 1,000. But quantity is not destiny if your doctrine and enablers are modern. Britain is building 2 heavy brigades around CR3, with the rest of its land punch dispersed across deep fires, long-range drones, electronic warfare, and air power. Classic NATO burden sharing, British style. The fleet is smaller, yes. The ambition is to make each vehicle count more, live longer, and hit harder within a connected kill web. And because tanks don't exist without an industry, the rebuild is rewiring Britain's armoured vehicle base, upgraded lines in Telford, a UK heavy supply chain, and hundreds of skilled jobs on the back of that £800 million contract and subsequent investments. When people say armoured renaissance, this is what it looks like. Welders, coders, optics techs, and gunners building something complicated together. And the anti-drone story doesn't stop at cages and trophy. Britain is throwing real money at directed energy after watching Ukraine's skies fill with cheap threats. In November 2025, after shooting down high-speed drones in trials, the UK signed a £316 million deal to push the Dragonfire laser onto warships by 2027. That's a naval programme, not a tank turret, but it tells you where British minds are. Defeat the cheap with the cheap to shoot. Tanks don't kill drones with lasers yet, but the service ethos is turning towards magazine depth and cost per shot across the force. Your CR3 platoon won't fight under the same sky as your dad's Charlie did. None of this means CR3 is perfect. Keeping the 1,200 horse engine is a vulnerability in heavy terrain. Weight will creep as armour grows. APS doesn't make you invincible. And nothing about a big metal box is subtle to a swarm with thermal sights. But perfection isn't the bar. Survivability per ton is. Kill chain speed is. Interoperability is. And on those metrics, Challenger 3 is exactly what Britain needed. The sharp end of a combined arms spear that learned from Kherson and Kupiansk, instead of waiting for a staff college lecture to catch up. Let's pause for some reality with a grin. Yes, the boiling vessel, the legendary British vehicle kettle, still exists. Yes, it has a proper digital battlefield to whisper sweet GPS nothings to while it brews the crew's tea. Yes, somewhere an American tanker is still laughing at hydrogas suspension until he rides in it and stops. And yes, the first time Trophy smacks an incoming cornet on a training range, you will absolutely hear a loader shout something unrepeatable on the intercom. If you're wondering how it all feels from the gunner's seat, imagine this sequence. A laser warning chirp. ELAWS says left 1,800 meters. The commander slews. Orion snaps a thermal picture. The tracker boxes the source. The gunner calls type. The loader shunts a unitary round from a safe, separated bustle. The ballistic computer breathes. The gun talks. The world makes that low-frequency thump you feel in your ribs. And if someone sent you a rocket while you were busy, Trophy throws its own metal fist. The tank immediately moves. Because in 2026, you never sit still after you shoot. And all across the net, that firing solution and contact report are shared. Because CR3 is a node, not a loner. Industrial politics? Sure. The partnership, sewing together Rheinmetall and BAE under the ORBSL banner, raised eyebrows in both countries. But that joint DNA bought the UK speed, guns qualified and delivered ahead of integration cycles, a turret test rig stood up early, and a UK-centric supply chain wired to scale. The programme's press notes read like a who's who of British and Allied primes, Thales optics, MilDef GVA processors, G&H periscopes, Curtiss-Wright turret drives, each an ingredient in a platform that's more system of systems than tank with a radio. Let's circle back to Ukraine one last time, because the war's fingerprints are everywhere on this vehicle. Britain didn't just gift tanks, it absorbed the shock of seeing Western armour under mass drone observation, artillery queuing, and FPV harassment. So it moved. APS funded, laser warning baked in, programmable HE prioritised, anti-drone fieldcraft integrated into training, and whole-of-force investments in drones and counter-drones announced at cabinet level. When footage of British trials with cope cages hit the internet, some called it a gimmick. It wasn't. It was the visible tip of a larger shift, except that the battlefield has changed, then change with it. The last piece is confidence. If you judge by headlines alone, tanks look doomed. Flaming hulks, tossed turrets, 1,000 viral clips. But headlines don't show the missions tanks accomplished, because they weren't dramatic. The village taken with fewer casualties because a 120mm HE round airburst over a trench. The column that pushed through because the lead tank's armour caught a blast, and the bustle vents did their job. The platoon that drove out because the crew heard a laser and popped smoke in time. Challenger 3's madness isn't that it's invulnerable, it's that it's optimised for the actual fights we see. Networked, contested, and under an unfriendly sky. So here's the verdict. Britain didn't chase a sci-fi autoloader or a power pack swap that would blow the budget for a decade. It put money where the kill chain lives. Gun, sights, computing, protection. And it embraced NATO ammo and coalition logistics like a grown-up. It learned, painfully, from Ukraine and made visible changes. Hard kill, laser warning, anti-drone doctrine, mass drone procurement, fast. It even remembered that the tank is a team sport and rebuilt the factory floor to match. If that's not legitimately insane, in the best, I can't believe they actually did it sense, I don't know what is. And if you want to know how far this revolution really goes, consider this. During demonstrations, the new digital architecture even enabled remote firing, proof that a tank can be both crewed and, in a pinch, robot-assisted. It's a party trick today, a doctrine question tomorrow, and a hint that the line between main battle tank and unmanned ground combat system is blurring faster than we think. That glimpse came straight from Britain's own CR3 demonstrations, and it may be the most radical seed planted in this programme. The bottom line, the next time a British heavy brigade rolls forward, it won't be nostalgic, it'll be digital, angry, and very hard to kill. Challenger 3 was born in an era of viral battlefield autopsies and built to avoid starring in one. The tank remains the blunt instrument of decision on the ground, but this one swings with precision. Question is, when the first CR3 squadron finally takes its place in Europe's deterrence line, will any adversary really want to test how insane it can be? Oh, and yes, the kettle still works. Priorities, United Kingdom. Hit like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. Bye for now.